Hello, welcome to Entre Redes RI, where soccer meets international relations. I'm Sofia Beatriz, and today we'll step onto the field with one of the most classic EIR theories, realism. You know the tension between Brazil and Argentina, England and Germany, or even the political rivalry behind a World Cup played on foreign soil? That's not just soccer, that's pure geopolitics. Let's start with a question. Why did a duel between Hungary and the Soviet Union in water polo in 1956 shock the world? Why did immigrants, fans, and diplomats get tense during matches between countries with real political conflicts? The guiding question in this episode is, to what extent is soccer a continuation of politics by other means? In today's episode, we'll understand how realism, a central theory in international relations, helps explain historic rivalries, fierce competitions, and the quest for prestige to the global sports stage. But what is realism? Realism is based on the assumption that states are the main actors in an anarchic system, that is, with no authority above them. In this scenario, each state seeks to guarantee its security and survival, often competing for power. Hans Morgenthau, in Politics Among Nations, states, international politics is a struggle for power. Kenneth Watts, in Theory of International Relations, specifically in Chapter 6, reinforces the idea of an anarchy as an environment that structures state into a self-help arena. In other words, cooperation is precarious, distrust is permanent, and conflict is inevitable. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's a reference. For realists, war and conflicts are constant possibilities. Even when there's no cooperation, it is unstable. Trust among states is limited, and the use of force is always lurking. There are different strands within realism, such as classical realism, Morgenthau, neorealism, Watts, and offensive realism, Mearsheimer. But all share the view that the world is a field of competition for power and security. Realism is a thought but effective lens for understanding the international system. Its greatest strength lies in clarity. States act like players who do not just each other's, and therefore every more is calculated. When we think about soccer through this lens, we realize that national teams, clubs, and federations also act like states, defending interests, seeking prestige, and projecting power, even if the battlefield is just a pitch. Step 3. And where does soccer come into this? Think of the Olympics during the Cold War, with the US and USSR dueling on tracks and courts while the world feared nuclear war, or the 1938 World Cup, where Nazi Germany used soccer as a propaganda tool, or even France's victory over Brazil in 1998, marked by rumors, political interference, and an alleged conspiracy involving Ronaldo. Another detailed examples we have are the World Cup of 2018, Croatia versus France. In 2018 World Cup final, France and Croatia represented more than just national teams. France, a global power, former colonial states, and UN Security Council member. Croatia, a young post-Yugoslav republic, recently independent, trying to assert itself on the global stage. Another one we have is West Germany versus East Germany, 1976 Olympics. An ideological duel on the field, with the DDR trying to prove that socialism could also triumph in sports. Another example we have is Argentina into the 1978 World Cup. The Argentine dictatorship during World Cup as a national showcase. The controversial 6-0 against Peru and final against the Netherlands were even strongly tied to the regime's stage. In England versus Germany, 1966 and 1990. Sporting replays of the traumas of the World War II, the finals and semifinals against Germany still carry symbolic weight in the English imagination today. Soccer is a symbolic stage for these disputes. The victory or defeats of a national team can reinforce or undermine the image of a country, For realism, this search for international prestige is an extension of the struggle for power. And as history shows, soccer fields are also political arenas. Topic 4. Let's look at an emblematic example where sports spill over into political arena. Water polo match. Blood in the water. Melbourne, 1956. During the Olympic Games, there was a match between the men teams of Hungary and the Soviet Union, marked by violence and political tensions. The Hungarians verbally provoked the Soviets, trying to make them lose composure. At one point, Valentin Prokopov struck Erwin Zender with a headbutt, causing a deep cut. Images of Zender's bloodied face went viral, sparking popular rebellion in the stands. The match was interrupted with Hungary winning 4.0. Later, Zender and 46 other Hungarian athletes defected to the West, fearing retaliation. Topic 5. Now let's look at realist analysis and its implications. Victory on the field worked as a declaration of symbolic power. The result reinforced the narrative of Hungarian supremacy over the Soviet system, a clear reflection of the many and intense interests Morgenthau described. The Hungarians used sports as an arena of contestation, a safe way to resist an oppressive military power. For realism, this demonstrates the pursuit of security and symbolic power, even without weapons. Trust is minimal. Defeat can mean humiliation, and every confrontation gains new dimensions. The phrase written by the writer George Orwell says it well. Sports is a war without a shooting. A powerful metaphor for exacerbated nationalist rivalry on the fields. This match was not just an isolated sport dispute, but a scenario where the realistic logic was expressed symbolically. Direct confrontation, the pursuit of moral authority, and the fear of defeat. Evident realist elements. Symbolic power versus military power, a symbolic victory against a superpower. Distrust and competition. Hungarians studied the Russian language and provoked the Soviets to destabilize them ethically. Minimal cooperation, defeating the opponent, even in a supposedly friendly environment like the Olympics. Reflection, sports as an extension of political rivalry. In realism, the pursuit of power is not only military or economic, but also symbolic. Topic 6. Soccer as a soft power instrument. Realism focuses on hard power, military and economic strength. But the war is not only about brute force. Countries also project power through culture, image, and symbolic influence. This is what we call soft power. Examples: Qatar and the 2022 World Cup. A small Gulf state decides to invest billions in sports infrastructure, modern stadiums, transport networks, and post-World Cup events. Researchers Justin James, 2021, highlight that the Qatar World Cup improved foreign investments, tourism, and the international reputation of Doha. Another study suggests a refined soft power approach based on Nobel Elias figurational sociology, taking into account networks of influences and the scale of the event. Comparison with realism. While realism focuses on coercive power and security, soft power posits the power of attraction, culture, and symbolic diplomacy. Qatar uses sports for national rebranding, global integration, and even to dispel stereotypes about Islamic culture and domestic politics. Another examples we have are China and soccer. Even without tradition in sports, China brought European clubs and sponsored events to try to legitimize itself as a sport power. And Brazil and the soccer art style. The image of a peaceful, joyful, and multicultural country has long been associated with the Brazilian national team. Pelé became an ambassador not only of the soccer, but of the very idea of Brazil. According to Joseph Nye, soft power is the ability to attract and co-opt rather than coerce the future of power. Reflections. The contract is revealing. Hungary used sports as a symbolic resistance against an oppressive power, realism, while Qatar used mega sports events to build positive international influences, soft power. This leads us to think. What makes a small country achieve global symbolic success? Strength, attraction, diplomacy, or all of them combined? To what extent is sport an autonomous arena? And to what extent it is a tool of state politics? Topic 7. Events that expose realism in soccer. Some historic soccer moments openly display the dynamics of realism. Here are a few cases in more detail. World Cup of 1938. Held in France, it was also marked by pre-World War II tensions. Nazi Germany had already annexed Austria, and the Austrian team was forced to play as Germany. For the regime, it was a way to display supremacy. For the world, it was a proof of soccer being used as a political tool. World Cup of 1970. Brazil three-time champion. The Brazilian military dictatorship used Pelé's team to strengthen the regime domestically. The victory was displayed as a symbol of stability and government strength. The Soccer War, El Salvador and Honduras, 1969. A brutal example of how sport can catalyze real tensions. Officially, the conflict was fueled by territorial disputes and migratory flows. But the spark came from a World Cup qualifier match. According to Polish journalists who covered the conflict, the war began after the referee blew the final whistle. Reflection. Realism is not surprised by this. War is for realists a permanently latent possibility. Soccer, when inserted into this environment of power struggle, can intensify rivalries and even legitimize military actions. The field, in this context, becomes more than a playing ground. It turns into a territory of national affirmation. Topic 8. Offensive realism versus defensive realism and tactics on the field. Within realism, there are branches. Offensive realism, as proposed by John Mersheimer, argues that states must always seek more power to guarantee their security. Defensive realism, as proposed by Watts, argues that seeking too much power can generate insecurity and provoke reactions. Examples. Think of a team like Germany in the 1970s. It dominated the field, commanded respect, and played offensively. On the other hand, national teams like Costa Rica in 2014 adopted defensive strategies of containment and survival. Even game tactics themselves can be read through a realist lens. Whoever seeks to dominate the opponent without measuring consequences risks provoking alliances against them. On the other hand, whoever plays too defensively loses prestige. Balance is both tactical and strategy, on and off the field. In today's episode, we saw the behind the emotion of a final, the tension of an anthem playing, or a flag being raised. There's a complex web of interests, rivalries, and power projections, because in the end, soccer is also a way of doing politics. In the next episode, we'll navigate through liberalism on the field. We'll talk about FIFA, global governance, and sports diplomacy in action. Thank you for listening to Entre Redes. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with those who love sports and politics, and follow us on Spotify and on Instagram, entreredes.ri. So now you know, between the nets of soccer and the threads of international politics, we meet here, because in the end, the ball also carries power. See you next Entre Redes.